It's March 19th, 2024, and I'd like to welcome everyone to what's sort of the turning the page on our budget planning. And so every early spring or late winter, we meet for an exercise called Big Rocks, which is just an illustrative description of what we hope to do at this point, which is sort of lay out the major components of our budget that we're aware of. Things like what are our anticipated revenue increases going to look like, what are our anticipated costs around big ticket items like salary and benefits, what are our major capital expenditures and the like. So to begin, I'm going to go ahead and turn over to County Manager Blaine Williams. So Blaine, thanks for being here.
Thanks, Mayor, and thanks to the commissioners that are here, and look forward to sharing some of this with you. It's building upon the budget guidelines information I gave you earlier. What I'd like to do first, though, is both for your benefit, and some of you are already quite aware of this, but also for the public's benefit in the spirit of transparency, that the budget process, you can look here and there's a timeline here. I won't read it to you, but I do want to cover the flow of it real quickly for the public, if that's okay. And so the way that we are now looking at the beginning of the budget process is really when you adopt the strategic plan for the following years. And we can talk more about your priorities, but as I said in the document, a budget, y'all, is really an expression of priorities. You have a limited amount of resources. There are so many great things to do, and unfortunately, you have to choose between them. So that's really when it starts, and that was last year, or actually March 1st of 22 when we look at that. Now, in any given year, in the fall, the departments start to pull their ideas together. Finance staff, budget staff prompts them by saying, by this date, we're going to need your budgets. They send the forms out. That all gets turned in roughly by the end of the calendar year. And then starting in January, the manager meets with all the departments that report to me, and then the mayor pro tem, and manager meet with constitutional officers and independently elected officials to hear their budget submissions. And then with staff, I finalize a draft to hand to the mayor, and that's where we are right now. Big Rocks is where we talk about some of the larger components in the draft budget so that you and the public have a good sense of where this might go. I do want to be fair to y'all. It's a very public process. I have to present a draft budget. I have to have some assumptions in there, whether it's raises or how we spend the funds. And let's be clear. These are simply my interpretation of what the priorities are based on what I know to be the needs of the government, as well as what I think you might be interested in, but invariably it's going to fall short. Number one, because we don't have enough resources, and number two, I may not be as finely attuned to some of the things that you'd like to see, which is why we have this iterative process. Sorry, something came up on the screen. So the Big Rocks. Why do we call it Big Rocks? And Commissioner Wright had asked for a really great visual demonstration, and maybe that'll be in order next year. But this is a lot of money, y'all. And I've worked with commissions in the past who really wanted to get down on very micro level to try and change the trajectory of the budget. But the fact is, there's some big rocks to it. There's pay, there's benefits, there's life cycle, there's commission initiatives, there's stuff in the strategic plan. All of those are priorities that are competing with each other for those finite resources. So after today, I will assist the mayor in answering any questions he may have with staff to help him infuse his perceptions into the budget on what the priorities are. And then, of course, in and around the end of April, he will hand that over to y'all to consider. And in May, there's several public work sessions that are scheduled for you. And then through the balance of May, when you feel like you're ready and have something everybody gets behind, then you'll vote on it the first Tuesday in June. So a little lengthy description, but that's the flow of it. And right after June, we start working on the next year's budget. So that's how that works.
Manager Williams?
Yes, ma'am.
When I'm looking at the timeline for the strategic plan for starting at 2022, so when we had a more robust conversation, that 22 strategic plan is what we're being guided by until 2025 with adjustments along the way.
Yes, ma'am.
So then in 2025, do we do a new robust, so really the budget is a 3-year thing?
It is a 3-year budget, but you will be able, like we have this past year, and as a matter of fact, in 3 weeks at the April work session, Joseph D'Angelo, our Chief Data Officer, will be presenting the proposed strategic plan for the upcoming year, which you will find relevant towards this discussion for budgeting. And we can get you that presentation out in advance. Because you asked a very good question the other day, well, Manager, would you bring the strategic plan to this meeting today? And we talked about, well, you know, in just a few weeks, you'll have a different document that's slightly streamlined. Y'all were able to jettison some initiatives to try and bring more focus to it. And rather than have 2 different copies walking around, we were waiting on that one so that you could be informed by that. But we can get it to you in advance. Did I answer your question, Commissioner Thornton?
Yeah, I just, and I guess the reason why I'm asking
Sorry.
is for my fellow commissioners and myself, because we talked about this yesterday, and I was thinking we were just using, so each year we do tweak, even though it's a 3-year plan.
Yes.
So whatever Joseph brings us, it's not going to be totally different from what we had laid out again. And my next question, and I'm be real quick, Carol. I still would like to see or have an understanding of what the zero-based budgeting is. I think that was something that we knew we couldn't do it for this go-around as late as we talked about, but I would like to see what that is, how it works, why it's good or why it's bad, or any other budgetary tools.
Sure. And there's a lot of different, there are several different forms of budgeting there out there. Zero-based one was used in the past extensively. Now, I will do exactly what you asked.
Okay.
No problem there.
Okay.
This wasn't how I'm not going to do that.
Okay,
I was
okay.
just giving you a little extra.
I'm just familiar with that from school board.
Sure.
So that's-
No, and I'm not, I will do that.
Okay.
Some of the ones you'll hear more now more used is program-based or priority-based budgeting. Those are 2 that are more popular. But there's all sorts of ones out there, but I'll definitely get that, and you did ask for that before.
Kara?
Yeah, now, I mean, looking up here, we're on that box, it says March 19th, but if I'm remembering, seems like ages ago, back in January and 26, that's where we did that strategic plan updating and tweaking that you're talking about, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, that helps me.
You
tie
started,
up.
actually, yes, you're right. We did leave those out, and we should bake those in. So
No,
last fall,
They're in there. I mean, maybe there were others last fall, but.
you had your mayor and commission retreat, Amicalola Falls, and we really dug into some of the strategic
Right.
planning there. And then it got taken back to department directors and got some feedback. We visited with you very briefly at the January retreat that you referenced. And they've done some additional cleanup work. And Commissioner Thornton, there shouldn't be a lot of new things added to the old strategic plan. I think most of the good work that was done was sort of cutting some things and getting more focused.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Myers, did I answer your question?
That was very helpful.
Okay. All right. So I mentioned these priorities a little while ago. You know, these are, as I see them, this is the same as what I mentioned in the budget. There is no right, the only right answer is what a consensus of this commission thinks. So that's how that works. But if you have other priorities, remember, this is a big rocks type discussion. If you have other priorities, it's good for you to express those or articulate those to your peers for sure. Like, well, we want to also consider these types of things. You don't see the social services up there that we've been able to support through the commission's direction with regards to ARPA funds, for instance. You know, the homelessness and the affordable housing, youth development, behavioral health. And of course, ARPA is wearing off, and that's a very topical conversation that some of y'all are having. So if you do have other priorities, you know, there's 11 of y'all. There's a big old budget. There's tons of initiatives in the strategic plan. So I'd encourage you to kind of talk about it in big chunks to get people oriented and then really start drilling down. we do reference some of the strategic plan that's relevant to this exercise today. So what I'm going to do, y'all, is talk about expenditures first and then revenues. So with regards to expenditures, we're going to start with pay. And HR did recommend a slightly higher increase here, but again, it's priorities, and there's lots of things that didn't get funded that are worthy. And so this is what I'm proposing. You can go up or down from here. There's two different pay plans, if you'll remember, from the 2018 pay study we did. There is a unified plan, which is all non-public safety employees, and then there's a public safety plan, which is for public safety employees. We're recommending 4% for both, which represents 1.5 million for the non-public safety employees and 2.4 million for the public safety folks. And that's a 4% step plan pay table for all employees, as well as to fund the step increases that are happening every year. It's different folks hit their step. So that's all in that one. Another issue I want to talk to you about is in the second paragraph here. And what we found, y'all, and I'm going to show you, well, I'm going to go to it real quick so this makes sense to you.
This is driving me crazy.
So this is our attrition, if you will, turnover rate over time. And you can go back almost 10 years, and you can see things that have happened and pay increases. And what I'm glad to say is I think through the investments you continue to make in the pay plan and some other external factors beyond our control, we're starting to fill back up with folks, and that's a good thing. But it also has another side to it, and that means it costs more. So back in 2018, 2019 or so, we used to budget for 100% full employment, so that every position was funded as if that position was filled 365 days a year. Well, that didn't happen very often, that we had that type of employment. So invariably, the budget process looked like this. We had big numbers to fund going in, and then at the end of the year, we had big surpluses because we didn't have all those folks. So it became this exercise of where I would come to you and say, hey, we're projecting big losses this year. We've got to spend all this, spend these funds, and then we get to the end and there would be a big swing the other way. And that's not a good way to budget, because what that means is that cash that or the savings at the end of the year could have been deployed towards something you wanted to see. So we started budgeting a little tighter to represent less people actually in the positions. And you'll remember, perhaps for those of you that were here, there were a couple years where we took the full employment cost and then we deducted a couple of $1 million and we funded that. Then that evolved as we continued to see folks with attrition. We ended up just picking a point in time, and however many positions were filled, maybe 1,400, that's what we funded. What that saw, though, was there were no salary savings on the back end, which traditionally helped to fund, any fund balance that we had. So what I'm proud of, though, y'all, is that we have flexed. We've tried different things, different strategies, and we're responding to the conditions. And so we're going back towards putting more money into the funding of positions because we're filling up. We're also giving pay increases. And then there is a correlation between the vacancies and overtime, and we can talk about that. But all that to say, we're sort of fighting. This year, we have, a little over $10 million in new revenue, but we're having to make up for some big things. So for instance, we're going to say a $3 million of that 10 needs to go in the budget to be there for the filling up of these positions, okay? So that's $3 million right there. And then on top of that, you've got the 1.5 million and 2.4. So you can see just those three things is about $8 million or so. So there's not a lot in this budget. That can be good and bad. But that's what we're looking at. And we do have a pay plan that we're working on now. But I just want to say the good news is you can see y'all been investing, and we're starting to bring people back to the government to work.
On the bottom of the last page, It says that a work session is scheduled on April 19th for additional information related to pay. Will there be, like that next chart that goes overall for the whole county, will we have some breakdown by department, and especially some of our departments, or all of the departments for that matter?
Yes, we don't have all the departments, but we got the bigger ones.
Okay.
And yes,
Yes.
HR, I did ask, and they've updated that. I think that's really good data.
Okay.
And I don't know if that'll be baked in the presentation, but we'll certainly send you all that information.
That would be helpful when we start hearing from,
And I guess that was
People.
my point, with, and I guess you said there are new terms for budgets. What Carol is asking in the future, being able to, what did you call it? You're not calling it zero-based budgeting no more. What do
The
you call it?
program or priority-based
Yeah,
budgeting?
yeah. It kind of sounds like what Carol is asking about as we go into this budget season, is to be able to get a good snapshot of the department. I don't, being in the past budget cycles just as a commissioner at the general, I did not get the same impact that I got when I was with Kelly and the shorter.
Independently elected.
Yeah, I didn't get the same impact that I think all of the commissioners should have going into this project. Go ahead.
Okay.
I got a question. So, we're talking about this, but
Here you go.
where does our taxes and stuff come into play on this? We're talking about spending this money.
Yes.
But we haven't said anything about the taxes or property taxes or, what that's gonna look like, so,
As I said, I'm going to do expenditures first and revenue second.
okay, so it's in this report?
It's coming.
Okay, all right.
Yes,
okay,
sir.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, 'cause, yeah. 'Cause, we just got this today, and I hadn't had a chance to look at it.
No problem.
Okay.
Yeah, no, but I'm going to do
Okay.
expenditures first, and then we'll do revenues.
Okay.
So going to benefits, we did the employee survey this year, and obviously pay and benefits were right up there at the top, and we got a little more insight into health insurance. And so y'all were able to see, we moved up a month early, the benefits presentation last week. And if I might, again, mostly for the benefit, public's benefit, but also to remind some of y'all that perhaps weren't there. So the way that in this budget, it's proposed that we hold constant employee contributions for health insurance this year like you did last year, as well as any plan design. When we were strategizing with our advisors on that, I said, y'all, it's very, putting myself in your position, it's very difficult with a lot of different plan proposals. There's different type, there's employee only, there's employee and spouse and so on. It's really difficult to understand where we're headed. And so we really put our heads together and said, how can we communicate where we think we should be and the commission understand it and tell us, no, that's not good enough or that's too much. And the way that we've been doing it has not been very helpful, I don't think, for you to be able to get to that point. And so we really boiling this down to two things, y'all. One is the share of employer cost of the premiums for health insurance, and the other is how relatively rich the plan design is, okay? And so we want to give you two metrics there to shoot for, and then let you think about that, talk with folks, but over time going forward, you can use these two things until we find something different that makes sense. And so with regards to to employer cost share, we're currently around 71%. And what we're shooting for, y'all, is that we want to bring it to 75%. So for every $100 of employee premium, the government pays $75 and the employee pays $25, okay? We think that's good. We're told by our advisors that is good. Now, is it the best? No. Is it the worst? No. But we need you to tell us where you think we should be, okay? As well as the plan design. And so there's so many different variables there. There's so many different types of plans. There's different co-pays and deductibles and things like that. So what we do is we depend on our advisors to benchmark our plan against others. And we need to see the cohort that we're being compared to. But just as a place to start, y'all, I said I would love to be able to say that ACC Gov's health plan is in the top 50 percentile of our cohorts, okay? So that is a bit of an arbitrary number. You might want to say, we want to be in our top 10%, but if you tell us that, we can model what that looks like and tell you how much the cost is, okay? So we're moving it forward on those two fronts, that you and the public and the employees can understand the value that they're getting and then respond to that. Pension. So I'm told that last night we got a packet from the actuaries that's probably going to increase the amount of the required annual contribution of pension. I don't know the exact number. It could be $1 to $2 million in that range. So this number is not correct now, perhaps. And staff's reviewing all that, and they're going to let me know about it. But what we had planned here was that there was a 13.1 annual required contribution forecast by our actuaries. What we intended to do was increase the pension contribution from last year by $1 million and then use $500,000 of the pension fund credit balance. So we've got about $5.6 million in pension credits, and I was only going to use a nominal amount, about 10%, to help get this done. And you'll see in the rest of the budget why I cut back a little bit on employee raises, using a little bit of pension credit. We're trying to make it work. There's just a lot of demands in here. Okay, addressing deferred capital maintenance and replacement. So in the last few years, this commission has really invested both in its employees and life cycle cost, and it's showing. As I said earlier, we've got our ranks filling back up, and y'all have made some inroads on both our fleet and facilities life cycle because there's been some big investments in it. This year's no different. As a matter of fact, coming up, we'll talk about it. Actually, you'll vote on it tonight. But the purchase of that fire apparatus, normally that would have just been part of this budget presentation. I would have advocated buying them. I would have advocated using unallocated fund balance to close the gap. The only reason we're doing it tonight is because of a price increase that will take place shortly after tonight for those fire trucks, which if we wait will cost us an additional $650,000. That's why we're doing it now. But in effect, it is a buy down in the budget against these liabilities in the future. And so that is an appropriate use of fund balance, not to start a new initiative that's going to go on forever, but to pay for these one-time purchases, okay? And that's what we continue to try to match that with. Now, just to give you a sense of how I've had to struggle with this, and this is not different than any year, y'all, the capital budget requests were almost $30 million. In my budget, I'm funding $10 million. So I have to cut $20 million from capital requests, and I can tell you that not much of it is extraneous. I mean, these are all things that are legitimate and that folks need. And as I've told you in the past, from my own calculations, which are gross at best, I would put our capital liability probably around $20 million a year. We could probably bring that number down a little bit, but we've been funding it on the order of, when I became manager, it was around $5 million a year, and we've got that up to 10. And the great thing I want to point out, y'all, is we have also transitioned from paying for this year's capital out of last year's savings into trying to get current year revenues to help pay for the capital we need that year. So in this budget, last year it was 6.9. The last sentence you can see it's 7 million. I don't want to understate the importance of that. I'm not going to call it paying it forward, but we're not paying it backward. So we used to wait on last year's savings to see what we could fund in the future year. But right now, the way the budget's structured, and next year, there should be, depending on what the revenues are, we'll have at least 7 million of those years' revenues that we can put towards capital. So we've been building that up as well. And because of your investments in this, we have really worked to bring the facilities lifecycle program back into shape. And this is what Andrew has given me recently. I didn't realize that we had made up that much ground that quickly. But this is where we stand now.
Can I ask a quick question about that slide?
Yes.
That fund balance, so is that after if we pass the fire fleet tonight, that's after that?
Yes, 11.5 million after the fire, if you do that.
Okay, and does that include the money accrued from investing ARPA funds? The interest on ARPA funds?
Let me
Or
just
is that
check real
kept
quick.
separate still?
Is the ARPA interest still in right now?
That's from last year, yes.
So from last year, yes, it's not been broken out of there. So that was, yes, because.
From last year, yes, it's in there, or last year, yes, it's not in that
Chris?
figure? Sorry.
It was in last year, the number we start with is the fund balance at the end of FY23. So interest earned off of ARPA in FY23 would be included in that.
Okay.
So the answer, it is included,
Yes.
to the tune of 2.4 million.
Yes,
Yes.
But the interest in FY24 is not included?
that's right, because we haven't finished FY24.
Okay.
And you know, and we talked about that at the retreat, about ARPA money, whether we're going to use it for anything, putting it in the fund balance, to me, it's a little bit deceptive. Even if you want to use it for anything else, I just think it should be in a line item by itself, because nobody tracks that money unless they're just tracking it. And I just think, I have no problem using the ARPA money, but we talked about this at the retreat, that should, and we go back to what you said, we talk about stuff, but we don't vote on it. So we talked about it, but I just think that it should be in a line item by itself, so we should be able to see at point blank what's ARPA and what's taxes and other revenues.
Well, we can certainly do that. I do, because, Commissioner, y'all's words matter, and we're in a curious time now. And so I want to address the comment about deceptive. The reason why it was in there was because we do a lot of cash management with all of our available funds. And certainly, if it's a separate fund like a utilities fund, it goes back in there. But I think what happened is it all got invested and it all gets put into the unallocated fund balance until you budget it for something. So no deception there. It's a past practice. I certainly appreciate why you would want it broken out separate, and I think that's something this commission can call for.
Do we need to vote on that?
Well, it is a budget line item, so in order to take 2.4 million out of unallocated fund balance and put it into a separate budget line item, that's above my approval level.
Okay.
Jesse?
I just wanted to clarify one other thing, because this came up before when we were talking about ARPA. The interest that's accrued, which I know how it's being accounted for, but do we have clarity yet on whether it can be used for the same purposes as ARPA funds themselves, or if it has the same restrictions as general fund?
I don't believe it does have, I think it's, and really, we could have booked all of it under revenue replacement. So I don't think it has the strings once it's gone through that process, but we can check with staff on that.
Okay.
I actually have.
So,
I'm
sorry. I guess there's like two ways to look at this. There's the strings, right, like what would restrict it, but then
Well,
there's
I
also.
should say the compliance
There's
guidelines
also
from the
the
Treasury.
opportunity potentially to use it differently than we can use general funds, right?
I think it would probably be considered general funds.
Okay.
If it doesn't have the federal strings, then it's going to, and let's be clear about that, and to get to where you're talking about. So federal dollars, you're able to do a lot more with those as far as give them to individuals, because the federal government's not subject to the state gratuities clause. But if it doesn't have the federal tinge to it, then it's probably subject to the gratuities clause.
See, I guess I'm just wondering if we have the option to account for it either way and then use it accordingly. Do you see what I'm saying?
We'll find out.
Okay, thanks.
Commissioner Hall, are you talking about the interest or the actual dollars?
I'm talking about the interest.
Okay.
I feel like it's pretty clear on the actual dollars, but there's been this
Okay.
question mark around how the interest could be used.
Okay.
We'll clarify that. Carol?
I just need help understanding this chart. That's, I
Let
just
me
want
help
to
you,
use it.
Carol.
What is this, yeah, I know it's lower, it's at 200, and I can't really read that, what that would be. I guess I could be looking
So
here.
this is everything above the bottom axis
Yeah.
constitutes a deficit. And so from 2017 to 2022, this is how much we weren't paying for. okay? And it was growing, whether it was
That we
roofs.
we should have been paying to keep up with so we could replace the roof,
Roof HVAC,
right, everything else.
for years, I never approved any carpet paint, nothing like that. It was just roof, HVAC, anything to protect the building is what we went for. And so because there just wasn't enough funds to do everything in those priorities, and that grew over time. And then we've really started investing in trying to do catch-up. And there was some carry forward from those earlier years that got deployed. And so this is from Andrew. I've not had time to really vet it, but he's certainly on top of things, and he's saying that we have really chewed into that deficit in the last couple of years.
It looks like we're like,
At zero.
At zero, like we are where we should be if we're being frugal.
Well, let me also, if I remember correctly, I believe that Central Services was looking for about $4 million, and I didn't fund that much, so we might be starting the deficit all over again. They're just considerable
Okay.
needs,
We're closer.
We are, well, according to this chart, we're back to where we need to
Okay.
be. And I hope y'all appreciate that, because you saw in the pavement presentation the backlog that we have on paving. And I'm going to show you fleet too, and you've seen that in tonight's agenda item where there's still a deficit, but we've got a 10-year plan to catch up. So what I'm saying is, oftentimes it's hard just to keep your head above water, but I'm telling y'all, and we have been fortunate. I don't think anybody would argue with the growth that's occurred in Athens, but what I'm saying is that y'all have put those dollars to good use. We've caught up on historic deficits on several very important, pieces of the government. So let's talk about fleet real quick. Y'all are still working that 10-year plan, and you've seen all that. And I'll show you that chart again. But we continue to want to plow money into that to catch up. And then the previous commission, when they allocated all the ARPA funds back in March of '22, one of the line items at that particular year, they needed to tap ARPA to help balance the budget for some things they wanted to accomplish. And I believe in that first year it was like $2.2 million. Well, if you go to the next budget year and you suddenly take that away, then the first $2.2 million of whatever your new revenues are just goes to pay for something you did last year, which is fine, but it's hard to make a shift like that. And so the commission decided to sort of step it down over time, and this year is $900,000 less than last year. So we're using less and less ARPA to balance the budget, and that was part of the plan. But again, the $3 million I told you about, we're having to put in there just to take care of the folks that are coming back to the government, plus another $900,000 for less ARPA. So we're starting with $4 million in new revenue just going there. Nothing new, no raises, things like that. So I think that's important to understand. And another insight as to why there's not a great deal in this budget. And this is our 10-year fleet replacement backlog. This is how we plan to get it down. And this is FY22 and FY24. You can see the gap between the red and the blue line. That is new space that you've made up from your investments. And this is before you do or don't buy the fire apparatus. And if you do buy that fire apparatus, the chart in that particular agenda item shows y'all closing the event horizon here to FY29 or 3 years. So again, this chart, along with the facilities, we're making some inroads on historic deficits. All right, this is a detailed, or a little more detail as to some of the things that are making up the expenditures. Catch up with you here. Now, I mentioned to you that we've got some new pension numbers, so that'll be new information. This week is also the negotiations for the fire union collective bargaining agreement, so we don't know yet what it is they're asking for. We've got a sense of it, and we're trying to work through that right now. But those are two unresolved issues that will come to you later. So some of the major operational increases, You can see here, our software systems, fleet replacement, vehicle liability, the inmate medical services contract, electricity for street lights, and then some smaller requests that really are operating cost increases as things get more expensive to do. And then some of the additional positions that are of note here that are new, the facilities rehab crew. So this is the paint crew where we use the 3 correctional diversion center participants to do that, and that helps with our life cycle costs. So we're killing 2 birds with 1 stone, if you will. Probably shouldn't say that about the birds. I'll come up with a different analogy, but either way, we're helping people rehabilitate, we're teaching them skills, and we're also having a cheaper way to drive down our facilities liability. I think Commissioner Poole has a question.
What was the 2 things that you said are not reflected? The firefighters union, and what was the other one?
The pension.
The pension.
Annual required contribution.
Okay.
Okay, and then the firefighters, EMTs for the ladder truck. So if you'll remember, some of the arena development brought up a very involved discussion about building heights. And I think it was, for most folks, walking around knowledge that, well, the reason we only have 10-story buildings in Athens-Clarke County is because we only have a 10-story tall ladder. Well, that's not true. We actually have one longer than that. But what really, and if you can think about this, the taller the building, the more far-flung that personnel are to try and clear it and watch each other. So we simply are not staffed to serve taller buildings. And that was something that became clear to me in the last couple of years. And so we proposed to you a couple of years ago sort of a 3-year plan to add staffers for the fire department to make sure that for their safety, that we've got enough folks on scene. And so this, I'm trying to stick to that plan, and we're adding 3 full-time positions for that.
Commissioner Davenport has his hand up.
Excuse me, FY24 budget, before FY24 budget, we agreed on the sheriff inmate medical service contract. Can you go over that? And is that normal for, after 1 year, 153 increase?
Well, and this was not all the sheriff asked for, to be fair. So if I remember correctly, it was something on the order of $800,000. And what the sheriff was asking, and I don't want to speak for him, but the way I interpret it was, if enough people come into the jail, the way that those jail medical contracts are structured is that there's an average daily census, if you will. And then if it gets above a certain threshold, then that tells the vendor they need more people or more services on site. So that's all prearranged and dictated in the contract. And the sheriff is feeling close to the next stair step and wanted us to go, he's asking that you go ahead and fund that. And that hasn't happened. It could happen. Maybe it's likely to happen. But you'll see that there's so much in the budget to fund and stuff that didn't get funded that if we got to that point, then we would come back to you mid-year for a mid-year budget revision. Okay. So the 153, though, in the contract, so every year there's an escalation clause, so every year it gets 3% more expensive, and that's how a vendor over a multi-year contract would control for inflation. And so that is required in the contract, the 129K. And then he's got some estimated medical costs of only $24,000, which is not the stair step. It's just some ancillary things that they have to pay for.
Okay. And the electricity for street lights, this Georgia Power?
Well, actually, we've got 4 providers. We're one in certain places, like downtown. Georgia Power is by far the biggest. And then we've got Walton EMC and
Jackson EMC.
Jackson EMC. Sorry, Jackson. So we got 4 of those. And, historically, we've been about $100,000 low in street lights, and that's another issue about adding more and more. But this is based on trying to catch them up on actual increases. In the old days, y'all, when we had salary savings, I didn't worry about it because invariably not all the public works employees were going to be working, and we had some extra money, and we would make them whole. But we've been trying to increase that over time.
John?
So when you're figuring these increases on the different things, is there a fund balance for, like, fleet replacement? We're increasing it by $503,000. Did they use everything we allocated them for '24?
There is a fund balance, and I'll have to tell you what that is, but we have drawn that way down over the last 4 or 5 years. So it used to be fairly considerable. I'll have to find out what the balance of it is.
But like for each one of these things, like the annual enterprise software, how much did we allocate for that last year? And is there going to be a fund balance on that? And we're increasing 200,000 over that fund balance?
Okay, I now understand your question. So the departments, they don't have fund balance. We can carry forward, so maybe something, money set aside for something that isn't done on June 30th and may lag a couple of months, so we can carry that money forward. But by and large, if a department doesn't spend all its funds, then it goes into the unallocated fund balance for next year. That's the surplus, right?
Right.
So if there's anything left over from departmental spending, different though from enterprise funds like water and sewer or special revenue, well, or our transit system or the airport. Those are things that do keep their own fund balances. But the general fund, most everybody else, it goes into one big unallocated fund balance.
But you're increasing like what a specific department, but they used everything that pretty much used everything that we allocated to them. And then you're going over and above what that was.
Yes, and the fleet replacement is part of a plan to step up the contribution to get it where it needs to be. And of course, and there's a projection on what that looks like, but we'll have to continue to increase that to a certain point, and then it'll start coming down.
So another way of saying it is that these are increased costs for that level of service or an enhanced level of service. So new expenditures.
But, like for instance, with the enterprise software systems, these are budgeted pretty much to the dollar. We know we owe Microsoft this much and we owe NeoGov that much. And so that doesn't have as much play as perhaps the fleet does, where you may order cars but not take receipt of them for a year now, things like that. They may carry some money.
Right.
Okay. All right, here's some more specifics for you. The EMA Coordinator, and I know that was an email recently. Chief Scarborough had proposed a reorganization several years ago with a division chief, and I do believe, and what Chief Scarborough did at the time, and we're armchair quarterbacking, but he had split the duties between two personnel, division chief and the deputy chief, and in his mind, there was some redundancy there. If one of them was out, somebody could cover for the other. But the model I've been accustomed to and I'm most comfortable with, and I think it's effective, is where we have, a single person making the call in the event of an emergency. And just so y'all can understand, it's an interesting life for an EMA coordinator because they spend most of their time trying to get people to plan ahead for disasters, which people don't want to do. And so they're cajoling people. Then when an event happens, everybody reports to the EMA director. When the manager goes over to the EOC, I'm not standing up in front directing everybody. I'm asking the EMA director, what can I do to help you? And that's how the police chief and everybody else works. So this is a very important position. Yes.
So where would it be housed? Is it going to be housed
Fire.
on the fire?
Yes.
And this particular person would report to the chief
Yes.
of the fire department?
Only during non-emergency. And then during an emergency, they become the lead.
Right.
Yes.
Okay.
All right, Youth Cadet Program, y'all are familiar with that. And Officer Norman's doing a tremendous job, and we want to expand that. Digital Evidence Management System, this is something that both the solicitor and district attorney are looking for that are going to help them streamline their databases for these cases. The Grants and Community Impact Coordinator for the Sustainability Office. So I just want to remind everybody that, 2035 is the commitment the commission made to 100% clean and renewable energy by the government, and then 2050 for the community. So 2035 is 11 years from now, okay? That is not very far. I did a quick calculation, so this is probably a wrong number, but it's pretty close. So, we've been making inroads on trying to electrify the fleet, to get that off our dependence on fossil fuels. And the remaining cars, I think we have close to 775 vehicles in our fleet. And we'd have to spend, at today's $50,000 a vehicle, about $27.5 million to get there, okay? That's in the next 11 years, and that's just the cars. If you didn't know, our water and sewer plants, they're about 75% of our energy usage. Transit, Interim Director Victor Pope's been talking about hydrogen. There's a lot of great possibilities for us, but we really need to work to bring dollars in here to help close the gap on that. And so I do believe that this grants coordinator is going to be very important to try and help us find resources to meet that goal.
A question, is there any way to know, like in the, I don't know, in all those government, resources that you have out there, in terms of rate of return for these grant positions, especially with this one because there's so much federal money out there? Is there any way to anticipate or estimate what kind of return on investment for that salary we could get if there's information out there on that?
It really just depends on what the grants you qualify, but I'm sure there's a benchmark for that, so.
Yeah, because it does. I mean, I know when I talk to the sustainability office, they're like, well, we don't have enough resources to continue to apply for all these free money that would help with our energy needs.
Well, and part of that.
Federal money, let me clarify that.
And with grants, the grantor wants to see you do certain things, and so that's how they're incentivized. And part of the capacity issue with grants is, I think everybody says you just need to go get the grant, but then starts a multi-year project and compliance reporting that happens, and that just, so one reason we don't pursue grants is because not that we can't write them, it's just somebody has to do the work, afterwards.
Right.
And so we have to be mindful of that in your priorities as well. But, point taken, Commissioner Myers. Tax Assessor's Office, this additional position was recommended in the latest audit by Operational Analysis. Traffic Engineering, they've been asking for this for years, and I think it's warranted now. The Collection Route Supervisor is something that needs to adjust cost centers. It's in the wrong cost center for right now. The Municipal Court Clerk, Commissioner Myers, speaking of return on investment, the Municipal Court Judge Jollis told us that if you could hire this person, they would bring in at least that much money in those back online payments. They're just so far behind, and so I thought that was a good investment there. And assistant managers in the manager's office, this is going to help us better distribute spans of control. Right now, and I've been, with Josh's departure, Assistant Manager Edwards, it made us look at, he's only announced in the last 30 days, so we've been really looking at the restructuring. I've done some reading on spans of control, and, both Josh and Nikki are working 9 and 10. I've got spans of control of 5 and spans of being controlled by 11, plus constitutional officers and so on and so forth. I think we're doing good work. I don't know if we're getting everything done that you want when you want it done. And so we're looking at a different structure there. And this would just be funding them in the last quarter of next year. There are some SPOS facilities operating impacts, and then a reorganization here, which is not a big budget impact, but it's just a reorganization of departments. And in the charter, of course, it calls out that it's the commission's prerogative to establish, abolish, so on and so forth with regard to departments. So going back to Commissioner Thornton's questions about, or points about budgeting, so there's a traditional budget approach, which we have done, and many governments do, and that's really a department by department separate look. And that's pretty much what we're doing here. Over the last few years, we have tried to bring strategy to it, because prioritization is very difficult, especially when, with a commission like a representative government like we have, which is built to disagree, it's hard to get to that consensus and prioritize. And so we've been using the strategic plan as not only a way how to allocate the budget, how to understand your resources, but also communicate to the community. And I know that Commissioners Fisher and Thornton, we just had this conversation, how we communicate to the community what the priorities are and what's actually being done. So what should happen is what we're doing now, and that's where priorities should be the beginning of the conversation. And you're doing that with your strategic plan. And then you should look at the performance of the government against the priorities you have named to see what's working and what isn't. And you allocate more resources to the initiatives that are working, that are in line with your priorities, and you quit funding things that are not in line with your priorities. And Commissioner Thornton, this is not very different from the program-based budgeting and priority-based budgeting. You're putting your priorities up top, you fund those first, and when you run out of money, everything below the line doesn't get funded. And that's basically priority-based budgeting. So here, we have thought about it, and I know that Assistant Manager Edwards has been in governments that have this type of setup. I believe Assistant Manager Jones too, where you actually put the strategy and budget in the same group, because that's what we're looking at. What your priorities are, we're assessing, we're quantifying the priorities. And listen, the budget analysts are having these discussions on their budget, what the budget priorities of the departments are, one-on-one. So we really need the budget analysts really steeped in our strategic plans and your priorities, so that all of that's being discussed at the same time. And so I'm proposing that we put budget with strategic planning. We have a budget and strategy office. I also have a number of officers, the inclusion officer, sustainability officer, the public information officer, and for quite a while, they are treated like department heads, and in their words, paid like officers. And there's not a lot of difference between what they're doing, other than we've got some smaller offices with department directors, and so just to kind of, from an equity standpoint, and it's a very nominal amount, go ahead and turn those into departments, and then we have one less classification of employee there. And then finally, on the reorg, so taking budget from finance and putting it with data. And what I'd like to do is take the contracting piece out of HR and put it 100%, and I want to qualify that too, but put contracting fully with procurement in finance, okay? Now, when I say 100%, all right, finance would be responsible for contracts up to a point, but then, the department director is a very important part of the contracting process. They're often the go-between with the vendor. Obviously the department knows what its needs are, so how they inform the RFP on the front end, how they help assist on the back end, that's going to be very important. So I don't want to create, that's how it is now. By moving this, it doesn't absolve anybody from their roles in this. And certainly at the very end, the attorneys have to review it, I have to review it, the mayor has to sign it. So there are other folks involved, but I think this will really help us streamline and address some of the issues you have voiced concerns about. At the bottom, you can see what the asks were. The new operating budget request was $12.4 million, $30 million for capital, 65 positions across all funds, and we were not able to grant near that much. So there's a summary chart here on 14, and you can see how that all comes together. But I do want to note this for the trend watchers. The increase in our forecast over the budget is much less than what we've had in the past. And so we'll talk about the growth of the digest, but there is a little bit of a slowdown that we think is going on.
I figured it out. You go for your question.
So the 57 positions, is that, we're adding 57 positions?
Request.
That's what they
Request.
asked.
Okay.
The positions being added are all in your document, so
Okay, so it's not 57 that we're.
no. And I should have tallied that for you in advance. Yeah, I'll just ask y'all to do that real quick, and before we end the meeting, I'll tell you what the tally is. I should know that off the top of my head. So I'm ready to transition to revenues, but do y'all have any more questions?
I'm ready for revenue.
Okay. Okay. Well, as y'all well know, property taxes is a mainstay for most local governments, and it funds about 50% of our expenses. And the projection on the tax digest growth is about 8%. Now, here's a very important note for those of y'all just a year in on the commission, and then some of the veterans here, and certainly for the public. So I mentioned that timeline before, okay? Well, what's going on concurrent with this budget discussion, and they are totally separate, and at least we don't inform the tax assessor of where they need to be. That's totally separate. But the tax assessor has to certify the digest in July. And so they're going through appeals now, they're readjusting things. They're getting a better sense of what's going on. In the past, what's happened is I have turned in my budget right about now, and then over the next couple of months, they continue to look at the digest, and they may advise that it may go up by some amount, or it may go down by some amount. The last few years, it's gone up, and I have given you a balanced budget, and you found yourself wanting for more, and then there's usually some extra funds there, but that's not a guarantee. In fact, it could go down. But I say all that to say right now, from what we know, it's 8% increase. And you can see what that will generate here, about $7 million more than last year. And then sales tax is very similar. It's 20% of all general fund revenue, so between it and property taxes, that's 70% of what we pay for general fund. And we continue to watch the sales taxes go up and are appreciative of that activity. There's also other taxes. Yes, go ahead, Joe.
Do we have anything, I'm sure you guys have it somewhere, but that shows that growth over years for sales tax? And likewise with the property taxes too, so that, I know we have changes to the homestead exemption and such, and there's a lot more being valued and so forth, but the sales tax, I just need that comparison for better understanding.
We can do that.
Also, is anything coming down from the state for us when it comes to homestead extensions or anything coming down with that?
There's an evolving proposal, so both the House and Senate had separate proposals, and they're playing a little bit of wheeling and dealing. We have, I believe, 4 days left of the legislative session. The prospect exists of a floating homestead exemption for homesteaders that would cap increases in the future, and that wouldn't be in this budget year, but it would be the following budget year, if it appears on the ballot this fall and is affirmatively voted in by the public, as one would expect it to be. We'll see where that goes. So that would have impact in future budget years, but not this budget year.
And I think when there's a 3% cap, Mayor, when there's a 3% cap.
It would be a 3% for homesteaded properties
Homestead, right,
only.
yeah.
Yep.
Okay, so I think I was premature in my description of deceptive, so I need to correct that right now.
Well, thank you.
I think that how you've listed out the revenues, that ARPA money should be outlined here. That's what I was trying to say.
The ARPA interest?
Yeah, that should be a revenue.
Okay. And okay, we could do that. I will tell you, so we should have it out there. This is big rocks, and interest expense on all funds, not
That's
just ARPA, is a contributor. It's not a huge rock, but it is an important one. So we could take that under advisement.
Yeah, that's what I was trying to say, that it would be broken out, that you see it as a revenue like you see all the other items.
We can do that.
So that's not a vote issue, right?
You just want to see that graphically.
Yeah, I just want to see.
No, that's not a vote, but
That-
to put it in a
No,
specific
no,
line.
I
that's a
wasn't
vote.
trying to put, I was trying to list it out of the general budget.
Gotcha. Thank you for explaining that. Now I understand. Other taxes, all other revenues is about 1.9 million extra over last year. So use of fund balance. So I just want to contrast the use of fund balance last year and this year. As I mentioned before, you had substantive investments in employees and life cycle facilities and fleet the last couple of years. And those are cyclic, but they are capital and considered one-time, and that's an appropriate use for that. And so we've really plowed some money into trying to buy down those deficits the last couple of years. So last year, we used almost 13 million of available fund balance. This year, this proposed budget has about 5.6 million in it. And that would, so we're sort of bending the trajectory. We've done some big investments, we brought down the deficit, and then we want to get back to a more responsible amount of fund balance. And so what's being proposed here is that we would use 2.4 for operating compared to 4.3 in FY24, so we're lessening our dependence on fund balance for operating, as well as 3.2 million compared to 8.5 for capital last year. And then that, after all that's done, after the fire apparatus, and if you accept this proposed portion of the budget, then that will leave you with an available fund balance of 6 million after that's done. Now, we don't know what the surplus will or won't be for this year until after the year, but we're not counting those chickens, okay? We're hopeful there'll be some there, but this is irrespective of that. And here's a revenue summary as well. Okay, that's the presentation, but glad to answer any other questions.
I have a question.
Any mid-size rocks, pebbles?
I think Patrick had a question.
Patrick?
Go back to page 13. Okay. So the other items on page 13, the expenditures, it seemed like there was a lot going on with combining strategic planning, data, and budget into a new single department. Can you go over that one more time? Geospatial?
Yes.
Yeah.
So that just has to do with trying to align the strategic planning and the prioritization that we hear from you in that with what the departments and what we're budgeting. So right now, we're just doing a department by department look. And that's how this is organized. There's a bunch of tabs in here. It's each department. And so I go department by department and decide what's available. And we're still going to have that type of format, but we want to put an emphasis on the priorities of the commission and the strategic plan. And let me just say this too, Commissioner Thornton, that it is moving us towards these newer types of budgeting. Okay, so another type of budgeting is called program-based budgeting. So instead of department by department, you focus on something you want to do. Doesn't matter which department's involved, and we're funding this, and whichever department can step up and help, you'll get some resources to help achieve these objectives, right? So what we're doing with our strategy and marrying that with the data and getting those staff together, because it's a continuous process that we hope. We're going to help you identify your priorities. We're going to help find the resources and assign them to the priorities in a correct manner. And then there's going to be performance outcomes. How are we doing? So it's not program-based budgeting, but it is a move between what we're doing now, traditional department by department, and we're moving towards more recognition of outcomes that you want to see based on the priorities that you're asking for. So Commissioner Davenport, I say all that to say, we're of one mind as staff that this would be a good marriage between these professionals working in the same environment and sharing that information.
So there'll be a new department called strategic planning, and then under the manager's office, the public PIO, organizational development, sustainability, and inclusion will be its own department.
Those will all be their own departments. And the only difference is some nominal increase for their name change going from officer to director. But we're not adding staff. It's just changing some names of things and reorganizing it. And then the move from contracts from HR to safety and risk, we had talked about moving a position over there. But at this point, Finance Director Boyd thinks that he's got a different way to do this that would not require an additional position. So all those changes, there is a little bit of money for folks that are getting their names changed because it's, some upgraded duties, if you will, but no additional positions, no additional space or anything like that.
Carol?
Blaine, could you get us what that difference is? Because I know that a lot of our leadership, we lose some leadership sometimes because we're not that competitive. And I know that could be, we're like, oh, we're just going to give these people all a bump. But so I think it would be really helpful for us to see what that is for these departments.
That's a great suggestion.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
I have a question, Kelly. Are we going to, about the fund balance? So it says here, estimated 11.6 available fund balance in the general fund, but that's on top of the 2 months
Yes,
reserve, correct?
that's right.
So there's actually more than,
Oh, yes, yeah. No, this is above the 17%, yes. And we can give you both those numbers if that would be more helpful.
well, it probably would. I mean, I think in the budget, it has it listed on page 377. I mean, it just gives us a big,
More complete look.
It does, and it changes from year to year, so it's 17% of the operating budget.
right, so
Yeah.
it'd be a little bit more this year.
Yeah, that's right, that's right.
Yeah, Dexter? Yeah, are we done with the budget yet? 'Cause
Oh,
I have one more question.
Okay.
So are we, as far as the timeline goes, we always seem kind of rushed when we get it at the end of April. Is that when we get it, at the end of
Yeah.
April? I mean, is there a way where we can get it sooner from the mayor? Or, I think the charter calls for it to be in at the end of April, but I don't know if it's,
I could probably get a little earlier. I could probably do mid-ish April. You know, I do like to have some complete revenue numbers that we're able to hand over to folks.
yeah. I think just in an effort to give us more time to digest it and discuss it and to hear from folks, I think that might be helpful.
And then we'll hear from quasi-governmental orgs the first Thursday of May, so library, et cetera. Carol?
yeah, I know we keep mentioning ARPA money at different points here, but we're all like aware that this is the last year to encumber all those funds. And so, those months tick by pretty fast. We have budget money moving things in different directions. I think it would be really helpful to have a summary of that budget money and anything that is anticipated or desired or that staff is thinking of. I know with the youth development money, there's still several $1 million left over. And so as we're making decisions now, I think we need to be thinking about that money as well, so we could juggle all of these things. Even though it's not officially budget, it is the last year to decide how to spend that money.
That's right. And of course, that youth development funding is set for partnership with the Clarke County School District for the most part. And similarly, of course, we have the workforce fund that's sort of set for some as yet undesignated uses. Obviously, you know that because you and Commissioner
Right.
Taylor are working together on that.
But we haven't actually spelled out, have we spelled out that
So-
we're spending all the rest of the youth development money with Clarke County?
We've
We haven't-
essentially allocated it all either to the Boys and Girls Club and their partner orgs or to our partnership with the Clarke County School District. We don't have any set-aside youth development funds other than those that I just described.
Okay, and is that something, is that something we voted on the Clarke County schools? I just was looking at the ARPA monies the other day, and then I'll look again at what's on the web in
We
terms
did.
of that. Okay.
Commissioner Culpepper, staff just gave me the summary of the position, so, and that includes the 3 firefighter positions, but there's 11. So 11 out of 57 are proposed.
Manager Williams, you mentioned that we'll be interviewing the quasi-government organizations, or maybe the mayor did, I'm sorry. And I did send an email out, it was late this afternoon. I would like to know what exactly is a quasi-government in relationship to our government. I know what it means generically, but what does it mean? What are the qualifications and criteria? You could send it to me.
Okay, no, I'm glad to send it, but generally, just for the public's benefit. And that differentiation, before we called it independent agencies, but really there were 2 parts. There are actually 3 parts to what was formerly known as independent agencies. There were community partners, and we are addressing that through the new process. Then there are the quasi-governmental agencies, and then there are what I call the children of the government, and that is these commissions like the Greenway Commission or AIM, those folks that they have budgets that live in departments, but they like to do things, okay? Now, quasi-governmental would be like the library or the health department or Advantage or DFACS, some DFACS Health Department, those are purely state entities. That's a state government. Advantage is
Council on Aging,
the Council on Aging. Those are,
sort of designated providers.
they have a government status where, for procurement purposes, you could just directly deal with them, without any type of, proposal process. But you don't have to do it that way, but you can. So, and authorities are the same way, the DDA, the Classic Center Authority, these are all somewhat government, they qualify for that, and so we have more flexibility in dealing with them.
Well, I guess my point is, and I still would like for you to
Yeah.
type it up and send it to me. The Athens Neighborhood Health Center has a federal,
FQHC or?
yeah. So I'm trying to understand why they would not be considered a quasi-government, because they do have a,
That's what you might consider a certification process, not unlike a CHODO in the housing space, where you've met certain kinds of qualifications, and so you can receive some federal funds in a manner that maybe some different nonprofits couldn't. But it could be the case that other nonprofits could get that same certification.
well, I know they have whatever that is that you're saying, and that I think it would alleviate some of the misconception about the neighborhood health center compared to, for example, and I know it's state, compared to Advantage. I guess that's what I'm trying to say. So I would like to see that in writing, because I do think that they should be a quasi-government based on your definition.
Well, I'll consult with Attorney Drake on the formal definitions of those, and we'll provide some feedback and see where we go from there.
Yeah, and I had mentioned that before in the past about the neighborhood health center. Also, though, would Piedmont Athens Hospital, would they qualify
So
as a quasi, since they're authority?
they've sort of morphed into a different thing, given that there's a for-profit corporate entity at the table now. So formerly, the Athens Regional Medical Center was a public entity. That public entity still owns the land.
Right.
But they are essentially leasing that land to a for-profit medical provider, which is Piedmont.
Okay. Well, I guess I'm confused. I thought, I haven't served on that board, I thought Piedmont was a nonprofit.
They may have a kind of a nonprofit status, but they're a profit center. So they're different than a public authority.
They're a private entity.
They're a private entity, yeah, that's,
Okay.
That's
Okay.
right.
Well, that's news to me, because I did not know that.
Well, and there's nuance in all of that too, so I need to talk to the Piedmont anyway.
Yeah, I
on
think we need to
something
take
else, but I'll ask
take a
them.
look
I'll
at
ask
that.
them.
That truly is, because one of the things that, when I was on that board, and we looked at the merger, one thing that we specified, that we stayed nonprofit. Now, there's some other things that went on behind the scenes that I'm not aware of, but I know that was really a deciding factor for us to do the merger. So,
I may have misspoken about the for-profit nature, but as Manager Williams stated, they're a private entity and not a public authority. Piedmont.
okay.
But these health designations, I don't know what that affords in terms of flexibility. I'm not up on the latest federal law, so I'll go straight to the horse and ask them.
And the reason I bring that up, because I mentioned to yesterday to Manager Williams, when Mayor Pro Tem and I was meeting with him in Rockdale County, they used their ARPA funds to give several $1 million to Piedmont Rockdale. Now again, how they did that, I don't know, but I know they gave them some money. It was several $1 million, so.
Yeah, and one of the things, of course, that local governments could do is sort of designate some funds directly to an entity. Macon, for example, gave money directly, sort of without a competitive bid process, to many nonprofits. So you saw that across the country. Carol?
Just a request while we're on money, because the ARPA data page, homepage for youth development does not include any of the, it only includes the youth sports initiative for $230,000 on that page. So we need to update that page for the public, because it looks like there's a couple of $1 million left on that data hub.
And so those are the funds that are undesignated to a specific activity.
You haven't taken formal action, so on the.
Oh, that's what I thought I had asked before. Had we
Oh.
taken formal action on the Clarke County?
Oh, well, only, yes, back in March 2022, naming them as a partner on a process to go through a planning, which they're just.
Right, but we didn't name, we haven't taken action on the money.
You didn't say we're going to have like art
Okay.
supplies or those sorts of things.
We're waiting to see what they're going to come up with.
Okay, well, considering what's gone on in the community, I think we, with youth, I think we just want to be right up front where our intentions are.
Gotcha.
So people aren't looking what's out here and saying, oh, look, there's money available there.
Evita?
And I guess this is a continuation of yesterday, and we talked about the mental health money. I talked to Commissioner Taylor, and apparently that $100,000 is still in the DA's office. So is that what you found out also?
Yes.
So are there going to be some recommendations between now?
Well, I need
We-
to speak to the DA.
Okay, we've had at least 3 incidences in the community, and that money was supposed to be earmarked for families and those impacted by these incidences with social and emotional help. And I'm gonna keep repeating about the young girl who got lost her eye. Nobody has been there to see her since the last time I talked.
Okay.
All right, going once. Big rocks, medium rocks, pebbles,
Yes.
grains of sand.
Yeah, I do. Can I unpack something, if you don't mind? Can you give me a little bit of grace? Don't have anything to do with the budget.
He's done with big rocks. He wants to go talk about something different.
Okay.
Right.
So we're done with
Amend
that.
the agenda to add something.
Was the budget,
No, well, this is just a meeting, it's a meeting where the one item was the budget review. If we're gonna be appropriate, what you have to have is a request to amend the budget. I make a request to amend the agenda, not budget.
For a specific activity.
For a specific action, to discuss something reasonably necessary to discuss or something like that. If we want to be in accord with how we need to do the
Open
meetings.
meetings.
Open meetings law, yeah.
Make a request.
Can't unpack something that's not on the agenda.
I understand.
But can you make a request now?
Yeah, you can amend an agenda to add something necessary to discuss under the Georgia Open Meetings Law.
Okay.
If you
So-
have something.
I do it. Again, it was a conversation. Well, let me go ahead and make the motion first. I'd like to make a motion to amend our meeting today that dealt with budget to add some other things that I'd like to unpack with the commissioners and the mayor.
Attorney Drake, I don't know if you need any more specific.
You might want to have a little
line
more
items.
specificity and just unpack, you know?
So one of the things I want to talk about is community engagement and civility.
I think that's good, that's specific there.
Okay.
All right, so there's a motion to amend the agenda from Commissioner Fisher, a second from Commissioner Taylor. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed, same sign. All right, motion carries, and the agenda is amended. So Commissioner Fisher, I'll give
and
you
it's-
3 minutes.
I got 3 minutes?
Yes.
Okay. This may take a little bit longer than 3 minutes. But anyway, we had a meeting yesterday with Manager Williams, myself, and Mayor Pro Tem Thornton. And one of the things that that's been bothering me, and we at our last voting meeting, And I didn't say anything. And sometimes it's good to be quiet and to listen. And some of the things that's been on my heart and on my mind is I'm very disturbed by how divided this particular community is right now over things that have happened in our community. And we as leaders and as elected officials, we need to start the healing process. And what that may look like, moving forward, and what our community expects from us. And one of that, I think, healing process is accountability. When I talk to people in my constituents, or even around people at church and in the grocery store, they don't trust our government. They don't trust us, and that's bad. That our community don't have any trust in what we do. I would like to read something that Manager Williams said that I could share. And it talks about the disintegration of community civility. The state of respect, polite behavior within a community has produced obvious and subtle conflicts that affect how local governments can move the agenda forward and make progress. There are issues that have manifested themselves in polarization that contribute to the heightened tension that makes constructive dialogue difficult. The rise of online communication has introduced new challenges to community civility by providing platforms that can sometimes seem to encourage animosity, cyberbullying, and the spread of decisive rhetoric, impact the overall tone of community interaction. The diverse community often have individuals with various cultural backgrounds, beliefs, and values. While diversity can enrich a community, it may also lead to clashes if not managed with respect and understanding. Apathy, disengagement from community affairs can contribute to a decline in stability. When people feel disconnected from their community or believe their voices are not heard, they may be less motivated to contribute positively. And I say all that to say we got to do a better job than what we have done in the past. And I've stated this before, and we got to be on the same page. We can't be in shallows where people are making decisions that's impacting this whole community. If we can't talk to one another, if we can't sit down and have a conversation, hey, I think we can do this, then it defeats the purpose. Why are we here as elected officials? We can't, we was elected to do a job by the people. We don't need to be doing things on our own that we think is right, and we don't involve the people that we represent. I went home after that meeting defeated. And I actually thought about resigning because I felt like, how can we continue to operate in this environment if we have a community that don't trust us? So I say to my colleagues, we got 2 years, and I think we're at a crossroad. If we don't get this ship moving in the right direction, then we're going to go down a very bad hole, in my opinion. So I say that, Mayor, thank you for giving me that opportunity, but there's some things we got to unpack, and we got to be better stewards of what we do and how we handle our business. Thank you.
Thanks, Commissioner. And I think if you look at communities, certainly around the state, around the country, and around the globe, these are the same kind of challenges that all of our peers are facing, in part because of those sort of changes in communication tactics that you identified there in that piece. Certainly we're in an environment now where people get their information from so many different portals that there aren't sort of common means of understanding kind of the common facts of people's experience. So, it's added to probably what was already just a challenging human dynamic as people come from different walks of life. So I appreciate you bringing that to us.
Yeah, and I agree with you, Mayor, and I'm going to say it's respectful, though. But sometimes we make decisions, though, that don't have anything to do with what's going on in the public. But we make decisions that's going to impact our community, and then we have to find out through other means, and that's not how we should govern. Everything that we do, we should do it as a team. And we do that, I played football, and if one person got out of line and didn't do their assignment, it mixed up the whole play. So if we're not on the same team and people got their own agendas going on, and we can't get our work done. So you're right, those things that happen, but we cause some of those problems, and we need to correct those things. So that's why I say it's critical over the next 2 years, how are we gonna govern? Are we gonna work together? we're gonna make a difference and let people get confidence back in this government, because right now it's not there. And if anybody on this commission think it is, then you must be sleeping on a rock. Because I know what people say to me on both sides. They don't like us. And I don't like, and we ain't perfect. We can't be perfect. But we're not well liked by our community. And we need to do something about that. And it's up to us to do it, though. But we can't do it in shallows. We got to do it as a team. We ride together, we die together. Bad boys for life.
Commissioner Myers?
Yeah, Commissioner Fisher, I appreciate you bringing that up, and I'm going to ask you for some more clarification on that, because it's not quite clear to me, like, what you're referring to specifically amongst the group here, or or if there are suggestions for moving forward. One of the things that I've been challenged with as well, thinking about the commission as a team, we're not quite a team, because we do represent different points of view at times. And I think the challenge there is to do so respectfully and thoughtfully. And that's, what I try to do. I might not succeed all the time, but that's what my attempt to do. So are there any specific actions you're asking for, or are there specific situations that you're talking about?
I can name several. If you like. So the mayor sent us an email some months ago about the ceasefire. He sent to all the commissioners. Well, somebody within this commission forwarded his email to that group, and they came back after us. I think when things like that come from the mayor, he shares that with us. It should stay within our confines. Now, if somebody do an open records request, that's different. But those things like that should not be passed along. And again, and Mayor, now, I don't want to be disrespectful to you, but same thing on the TAS stuff. The mayor made a decision that initially downtown should be 70%, and East Athens was 30. That shouldn't have been the decision he made. Same thing with Beechwood and Alps. Those decisions should not have been made by the mayor. This should have been made by us. And then I guess, and the last thing for me, this immigrant thing. And I know this happened before I got on the commission. I truly believe this is going to create a problem for us, regardless that we got the State Department involved and other folks. We already got a housing crunch. If we bringing in 300, I'm not sure what that number is, from outside, where are we going to house those folks? And we got people here that already need housing. So what you're going to run into, you got to have people that may come in, they may get housing first. So do they move up to the front of the line? I don't know. But again, we can't operate like that. Something that big that's going to impact this community, the commission at that time should have been notified and said, hey, this is what I'm thinking. And that didn't happen. So again.
And Commissioner, I appreciate the specificity that you offer, and I'd offer some perspective to provide some detail that may not be commonly available when it comes to potential modifications of any tax allocation district or any allocation. The reason that things are on an agenda through an agenda setting cycle and then a prospective voting cycle is exactly so that this body can weigh in on that and either decide, hey, we want to spend some more time on this, we want to do it exactly as proposed, or not do it at all. So that's exactly the purpose for a deliberative legislative body. In regard to kind of immigration activity, one of the things that kind of frequently happens when you're the lead legislative officer is outside providers, in some cases folks who in social services around food distribution, in some cases people who may be applying for funds to do an outdoor activity, and in some cases, and very specifically here, a State Department designated provider who said, we want to bring a few dozen families to town and support them. They come just looking for a letter of reference. And so in that case, as I do really many dozens of times throughout the year, I provided a letter of reference, knowing, of course, that they were talking about the scale of, again, a few dozen families in a community that generally sees a population increase on the order of about 1,000 people per calendar year. So kind of knowing that that was a small proportion of what would be an overall continued increase in population. If you look at the circa 2000 census, about 102,000 people, and today about 130,000. Again, somewhere around the order of 1,000 people a year. It's relatively small fries in the grand scheme of things.
Well, I think those are semantics, and I get it, but I think the bottom line is for me is I still think that's something that should have been shared, and I don't know what those numbers are. I mean, you say a few families, but is it really a few families? I'm here now. It may be close to 100 people. Again, I don't know that. I don't think we know that. I think, but the bottom line, what I'm trying to get to, Mayor, is share information. And I know, when I looked at the email, I know it was one of your bubbles up that you had put on there, but what didn't say the bubble up, that you was gonna do a letter or recommendation for them to possibly look at Athens-Clarke County government. And again, the way housing is in this community, even with those that few number of people, we still got to find somewhere to house those folks. And you're right, when people come in, a lot of time when people come in, especially if they're young professionals or whatever, they come for jobs, a little bit different, because they're going to probably hopefully be able to find housing. But when we're bringing people in from war-torn countries, we're dealing with mental health issues, we're dealing with language issues, we're dealing with a lot of stuff. So it's more than just, adding to how many people come in. There's a lot more. And so I just think that the only thing I ask Mayor is to share information with us.
Right.
And don't, because see, you may not hear what we hear in the community. That's why, I've came to you on several cases, hey, Mayor, this is what's going on. And I'm not coming to you just to be flapping my mouth. I'm saying, hey, this is what's happening. This is what I'm hearing from the community.
I think you correctly observed that we all are in different spaces and we're going to hear different things. I would identify that we've been hearing from employers for many, many years that they have the supply of employee crunch, and the State Department has been really specific in their engagement to say, we're bringing people in who are looking for work, who are qualified employees, who've got pretty strong skills, might have some language challenges and those kind of things, but their vetting process is very strong and very detailed. So I want everybody to know that, we're not talking about, the first 10 people that were swooped up off the field of a foreign land. We're talking about people who went through a very strong screening process and are getting a lot of direct eyes on them from the federal government and then their nonprofit provider as well.
And I get that. I know they're vetted very well. But again, I think, though, if you don't hear anything I say, just think about the impact it's going to have on the community. That's all I ask.
Appreciate that. Commissioner Houle?
Yeah, I wasn't expecting this. I mean, I appreciate my colleague speaking from the heart on what's on his mind. But I also want us to be careful that when we're up here, I think a lot about how the manager has said to me since before I was on this commission, our words really carry a lot of weight. And when we hear perceptions in the community, which I hear plenty of too, about people not trusting this body or people on it, if we're not careful about how we go about these discussions and being specific about what our concerns are, I feel like we can reinforce some of those perceptions rather than counter them. So speaking to the three specifics that were brought up, I just, from my perspective, want to share that I don't know which email was being referenced with regard to a draft of a resolution, but I'll offer that anytime a constituent asks me for something that I've got in my inbox, I just forward it. I don't feel like that needs to be an open records request. If it's not attorney-client privileged, it's a public record. I'm not going to send them to the attorney's office to get my email. Regarding the mayor's initiation on the TADS being inappropriate, I mean, when I first saw that on the agenda, I was struck. I didn't particularly like it. I had a bunch of questions. I fired off in an email about it before our meeting. We all had a lot of questions, but to the mayor's point, that's why it was on our agenda. And clearly we all had a lot of questions. We didn't like it. It's not something we've moved forward on as a result. So recognizing that the mayor has agenda setting powers and that for him to put anything on the agenda, he has to take some kind of initial action first, I don't see that as an inappropriate first step because it gave us the opportunity before anything was done to say no or to change it, which we did. And then similarly with the refugees letter, I mean, another thing that the mayor is empowered to do is say things on behalf of the government as our mayor and to send letters to people who want them. And so I don't really see it as inappropriate that he said something supportive, especially when we as a body did formally say that we want to be a welcoming community to people from all over. And legal refugees coming here who are fleeing intense situations of violence are people that I think we should welcome. And regardless of what I think about it, I think that the mayor's action in responding to a request for a reference letter was appropriate. So at least for the three things raised up, I don't really see anything inappropriate there, although I do appreciate that they all kind of touch upon the need for us to maybe as a body figure out how to better communicate with each other in between the public meetings that we have. And to that end, I think maybe rather than having this on-the-fly discussion in a budget meeting, we'd be better suited to have it in a retreat or something where we can really hash out the details and know in advance that that's what we're coming to talk about. Thanks.
Thank you, Commissioner. All right, I'd entertain a motion to adjourn if there's nothing else
Go
for
for
the
it,
body.
Tiffany.
If I might, Commissioner Myers mentioned earlier, sorry.
Oh, no.
Commissioner Myers mentioned earlier about ARPA, and I just want to remind everybody that I think we've got a retreat scheduled for May the 3rd on the books. That's a Friday. And so if you're so inclined, we can give you information before then, but that might be a good time to kind of talk about the rest of the year and what we got planned. So if you agree with that, we'll make that one of the agenda items, Mayor.
Be good.
Patrick has his hand up.
Can we get, you had asked us question for Big Rocks. Can I get a look at what the, so employee pay at 4% for current employees and no, can I
No pay
get the
tables.
numbers for 7%?
Yes.
Similar to what we did last year?
Actually, what I'll do, I'll give you the number for every percentage increase, and then you can do it, you can flex it however you want. That's closer to what HR was recommending in the beginning.
And service delivery is really big for this community. So like, I think when it comes to trash and trash pickup, did we ever fill those positions from the last year budget for the extra litter crew?
Let me ask the warden, I know we were waiting on the truck before we got them going in earnest. I mean, we got the folks, it was just whether we deployed them or not. Let me find out about that, Commissioner Davenport, I'll get back to you.
And what else? I think that's all I have.
Commissioner Thornton?
I don't know how we came from and then back to the budget, but I'm going back over here. We changed the agenda. We voted to change the agenda.
I think I thought of something late that Commissioner Myers had brought up
Okay,
about
and then that's how we do. So I'm
Sorry.
going back to what we changed the agenda to. And I think the only thing that Commissioner Fisher is saying is for us to find a way that we are more transparent, not with just ourselves, but the community. And maybe some of us don't go to the same barbershop, maybe we don't go to the same church, but wherever we go, we should have the same message. There should not be one thing being said and none of us don't know what the heck is going on. So I appreciate you, and what I've learned from this commission, you got to get in where you fit in. There's no place for us to have these kind of open conversations, and then you say we're going to wait for a retreat. Retreat may be 8 months down the line. There's no way to get some of these feelings out unless you stick it in somewhere. And I think that that's what Commissioner Fisher was trying to do. I don't even think there was a condemnation about what was done and what wasn't done. I think he was just bringing out some things that we could do better because people are talking, and I'm not going to take, I do enough stuff all by myself. I don't need to be taking nobody else's heavy load, okay? So I just wanted to get that clear, that I think it was appropriate because the agenda was changed. He made a statement. Commissioner Myers asked him to be specific. He was. And so it wasn't a good, bad, up or down or ugly. It was what we were in line to do.
Well, and I'll say, I'm very excited at the prospect of additional kinds of conversations. This work is not easy. It is complex. We're in a shifting world. I think we've all found times when kind of the format of our monthly cadence doesn't meet our individual needs or community needs. I think that's fair to say.
That's fair to say.
All right.
Could we adjourn?
Can we join?
Is there a motion?
Yes.
I adjourn. I make motion.
Second.
All right, motion to adjourn from Commissioner Thornton, second from Commissioner Wright. All in favor? Aye. Thank you. All right, everybody, Commissioner Thornton is going to take care of y'all at 6.
Oh, you're not going to be
as
here at 5?
I am going to be at the middle school at an orientation.
Email Jeff, but-